All right, folks, welcome to our predictions for 2024. Hard to believe it's already not even the beginning. It's like we're halfway through January. Someone put the jet fuel in 2024 already, and we are off to the races. Excited to have with me today Heather Hinton, PagerDuty's Chief Information Security Officer, and Eric Johnson, PagerDuty's Chief Information Officer. Just wanted to start before we dive into our questions for what each of your predictions are for this year. Just giving a kind of a quick overview of, we've heard these titles before, but just kind of a little bit about your role and your time with PagerDuty. Heather, let's start with you.
Sure, thank you. I am slowly coming up on a year and a half with PagerDuty. As the CISO, I'm sort of responsible for all things security, including secure development, secure operations, uh, audit, governance, compliance, and then working and partnering with Eric on the corporate security posture, data security, workstation security, employee security, the entire kit and caboodle.
Right, all the usual that folks think of, but on top of sort of the development that, since we're a software organization. Eric, tell us a little bit about your role, here in a SaaS tech company. What does it mean for you to be the CIO?
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be joining the discussion today. So, as a CIO here, I'm responsible for our enterprise data program, kind of the normal infrastructure and operations, the networks, the phones, help desk. We also have an enterprise applications team. It's leveraging sort of your typical transactional business technologies, the Salesforces, the Workdays of the world, and then obviously partnering very closely with Heather on all things security, especially around the enterprise. And I've been here not that long, only about 3 months. So it's been a jumping right in and getting involved. And prior to this, I was a CIO over at SurveyMonkey for 4 years. So excited to be here, and the future is very bright here at PagerDuty.
Yeah, super excited to have you and Heather with us today. And definitely something I'm already hearing is a little bit of like security as the team sport, since it's something like top of mind for each of you. I want to, it's one of those things is we starting off any year, folks always have their plans. Like, these are the big things I want to get done this year. But then there are these outside forces coming in that are, that moment of, hey, everyone's plan has first contact with reality. And so I wanted to start with, like, what are some of the big trends, those secular forces that are something that you're kind of preparing for and bracing for, is like, this is what's going to shape part of this year, on top of, sure, like, here's the stuff that we want to get done, continue our programs. Eric, let's start with you. What are some of the big trends you're looking out for?
Yeah, one of the ones that I continue to see, and I think it's a trend that's been growing over the years. I think there's always been this desire for organizations to really transform the way that they're operating through automating the processes they have, the data they have. And what we finally have come to, I think, and it started, I think, the last couple of years, but I think this year is going to be a real transformation for many, many companies, is how we're really going to get to this place of an automated enterprise. And that's going to be taking us into a place where tasks that traditionally were managed by humans are going to be managed by technology. And I think it's going to open up all kinds of really interesting opportunities for companies to really scale their organizations and really take folks that were in those functions or in those roles and actually repurpose those folks to maybe higher value work. And so I think that's something that's going to be coming, and it's been done in bits and pieces, but I think we're going to be at a place here now where maybe things that were more traditional automation, where maybe in the back office, we'll see those things starting to move into the front office. We're already seeing it in things like engineering with some of the AI technology that's showing up, that's kind of hand in hand with automation around Copilot and things like that. So I think the pace of that's just only going to get faster and faster. And I think organizations need to be prepared with a plan to how they're going to take advantage of it, but also be careful with it. Because I think if you're not careful with it, you can end up causing more problems. So a huge opportunity, but I think also something that people need to understand before they jump in.
Is there anything you're sort of taking on to prepare your organization to, again, kind of, hey, let's embrace this, but let's also take caution?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things people end up doing where they take automation and they lay it over the top of bad process,
Mm,
and or processes that aren't very clearly understood. And so a lot of work going on right now on, I think it's one of those things, before you start running, you need to be maybe walking or crawling a little bit. And I would say we're probably a little farther than crawling, we're more walking. But how well do we understand our business processes? How well are they defined? A business process that was working for you 3 or 4 years ago at a different scale and in a different time may not actually continue to work for you today. So really going back and assessing how your processes are working. Are they well documented? Are they best of class? Before you start trying to automate things, because I think what people end up doing sometimes is they jump in, grab the technology, and just start automating bad process. And so I don't know if that's a good thing to accelerate and automate bad process. Probably ends up hurting you more than helping you. So I think that's one of the first things we're starting to take a good deep look at.
that's a great point. Yeah, you don't want to pour concrete on the wrong thing. So,
Yeah.
clean it up a little first.
Yeah.
Heather, how about you? How does automation play out in security organizations? Is that something that you see as a trend on the security side of things as well?
Yeah, and just, automation isn't new in the security world. We've really been dependent on automation and to be honest, AI assistance for a very long time because some of the problems that we're trying to solve are very complicated. I think to the comment that you opened with, we've seen jet fuel poured onto all of this in the last 6 months, and I think that's really changing how everybody is trying to jump on board with automation. And to Eric's point, right, if you automate something that doesn't really work all that well, all you're going to do is get stuck deeper, and the cost of fixing just becomes that much bigger. Um, so I think there is, as Jen, our CEO says, one of the things you need to do is go slow to go fast.
Hmm.
I think that from a security point of view, this is one area where I am really comfortable going slow to go fast as we really make sure we understand what are we doing and how are we adopting automation across the business, right? In development, in product, in support of our support teams, our people, you name it, across the board. I think it's especially important because just as jet fuel has been poured all over automation and AI adoption within the enterprise, it's been jet fuel plus rocket fuel poured over the attacker space. And so, if we are running fast to protect our companies, it's because the bad guys are running even faster to compromise our companies and really focusing, I think, on people. So for 2024, for me, it's really going to be all about protecting the people to make sure that the people are not the vector to go in and compromise the data. We've seen that, right? We started to see that happening at the end of last year. I think it's only going to be bigger, better, faster, stronger, and we need to be there to make sure that we are protecting our companies.
Yikes. Okay. So, I mean, this definitely is one of those, this is not the time to sort of sit back and ride on things that you've been building and working hard over the last several years. What do you think folks should be doing to better prepare for some of these different types of threats? You mentioned protecting the people, also thinking about, how just the shape of people's jobs are changing in two ways is what I'm
Yeah.
hearing. Eric, what you're describing is, hey, we've got to re-examine our process and figure out how to automate it. And Heather, it's also kind of what I'm hearing is a part of everyone's job
Yeah.
is about not being that vector of attack. So what else would you suggest to folks for thinking about how do they prepare for these novel threats?
So I'll jump in because I know that, and then you can go over to Eric. I think we just need to remember security is a team sport is number one, and number two, everybody loves a good story. So let's really focus on awareness, on practice, on helping people understand. If we say no to something, why? If we ask you to do this training, what is the purpose? What are we trying to get out of it? Don't shy away from technical details. If we're talking to people about how phishing works, tell them, show them, have them build their own phishing constructs so that they can actually learn and be better at protecting themselves. Explain to people why we need to have strong passwords, why we don't want you to use the same password for your bank as for your company, why we need to have you out on MFA, and why I am forcing you, right? Why Eric and I are forcing you to use certain types of multi-factor authentication, so that people really get that deep understanding and that sense of ownership. Because with that sense of ownership and I'm in it with everybody else, this is something that I can do. You really reduce, you don't remove, you will never remove somebody doing something silly just because of whatever, but you greatly reduce the likelihood of something from a well-meaning but just mistaken insider.
Yeah, it's going beyond the checkbox kind of requirements of, okay, I've done the things, I've done the it's that what I'm hearing you describe is really deepening people's understanding to bring them along on
Yeah.
that journey, and that change, and thinking, even though it's like, hey, passwords aren't new, but imagine we're on a journey to be better about them, because it's going to continue to be something that's part of our healthy security posture. Eric, I'm going to bring things back to you. So, one of the big things that Heather mentioned is important for protecting, of course, is the data. And so, data is that critical asset. Tell us a little bit more about how you're thinking about managing data and protecting data in 2024. What's changed? What's new? What should people be thinking about?
Yeah, I think it's data is always one of those things that's sort of forgotten. People, I think over the last probably 5 or 6 years, people have gotten more and more data savvy. And I say that in the sense that each of the business partners that I support are starting to ask for more and more data. People are now starting to realize that using data to make decisions is really sort of the best practice, right? And I think it's always been sort of understood, but I think people are becoming much more data savvy. They're asking a lot of the right questions, and they're using data actually to help make some decisions that I think that are critical to the company. What I think continues to be a struggle with many organizations is they still don't manage the data like it's a sensitive,
Yeah.
critical asset. It's still managed as an afterthought. So people are excited for it. They want to make decisions with it. But the time and attention and investment that's made in cleaning your data, securing your data, rationalizing your data, standardizing your data, like this whole life cycle of data has continued to be a problem, even now, even today, where we are in the world, where data is pretty much the foundation of all the new technologies that we're talking about. Right? AI does not work without good data. End of statement. So what does that mean for me as a CIO is I'm going back into our organizations, I'm going back across the enterprise, and this is not unique to any one company. I think this is a general, I've seen this across many companies, even in my tenure, is going back and actually doing a lot of work around where's the data, how are we defining the data, what's the security around the data, and making sure that when we actually bring data to the business and our partners to actually leverage that for whatever it may be. It could just be dashboards and analytics. It could be AI, which we are doing. Making sure that data is at a place where it's trusted, it's complete, it's holistic, it's secure, and making sure that people are getting it at the right context and right time along the process. So it's going to be super important, I think, for companies to continue to make investments in data. And there's a ton of technology in the data space now around helping you do all those things. But I think it's one of those things that companies need to take a step back and say, is our data in a place where we can actually leverage it in a way that's going to drive the right decisions for us, or do we have problems with our data? Similar to what I talked about process. You keep layering technology onto things. I guess what you're hearing from me is there's a lot of basic things and foundational things that I think many companies sometimes jump over and skip over. And I think this is a year for, if you want to take advantage of all these new things that are happening in the market and some of these predictions we're talking about 2024, you really do need to make sure your foundation is solid. The analogy of building a brand new house on a really bad foundation, nothing good ever comes of that. Right. So I think that's really that's the message here.
Can I jump in, Dormain? I think I would just want to pick up on something that Eric said. Can we use the data? And I think there's actually even a bigger question: should we use the data? And I think that one of the things that this is a huge opportunity for is collaboration with the CIO, the CISO, and the legal team on should we be doing the data? What should we do with the data? Should we do this? It might be really awesome, but it is actually the right thing. So there's almost like an ethical angle to data handling that I think we've started to think about in the context of generative AI, right? Ethical use of generative AI. I think we need to push that into the whole data lifecycle. Is this ethically, morally, from a business point of view, the right thing to be doing with this data? It's going to vary company by company, absolutely. But there are companies that are doing stuff with my data that I'm not really happy about, that I would say don't pass the ethical test. And I think that's really something that we as consumers need to be helping to drive.
Yeah, and I think that brings up an interesting point about ultimately, to your point, Eric, that to do all the cool things you want to do, you really need that strong foundation so that you can make those really granular choices with what and when and how you're using data. And I like to sort of think about how we've come a long way from the time when data was pouring into a data warehouse and overnight ETL, and someone would look at a few people would look at a report, a couple times a week, and if it was down, it didn't really matter that much. It wasn't powering the business the way that it is now. And what you describe, Eric, of more people are asking for the data, more people are trying to make decisions on a day-to-day basis. They're also trying to use it in these novel ways, whether it's powering generative AI features in products that they're building or experiences that they're building. And it's just opening up a whole new set of ways that data needs to flow through an organization. And everything you described in terms of, is it trusted? Is it complete? Is it secure? And are we able to parse out where and what can we use this ethically versus what do we need to treat differently? I think this is a lot of work for folks to potentially go back, but it will power a huge amount of innovation. So I want to shift gears a little bit and just sort of step back. We've kind of been talking through. We started with automation and data. What other top priorities do you have this year, and how are those kind of connected to some of these predictions that you have? And I'll start with you, Eric. Like, what are some of those top things that you're looking at?
Yeah, we've touched on a few of them. I mean, the world of automation is really, really important. Like I talked about, setting the foundation, because I don't think you're gonna be able to compete in the world that we're moving into, especially around regulatory stuff. I think the competition everyone's moving faster and faster, and as an organization, I think you need to figure out ways that you can increase the velocity of the business. Automation is one of those ways. We talked about data. I think Heather said it really well, which is, there's a lot of data out there. What's the right use of that data? Making sure that you're compliant with an ever shifting set of criteria around being compliant with data, depending on what part of the world you're in. So there's a lot of complexity there. But at the same time, how do you leverage that data to drive real business value? I mean, we talk about the real basics of data, like, is it secure? Is it clean? Is it secure? All the things that are required in the data lifecycle, those are all really important. But the next piece of that puzzle is, are you actually doing anything with that data? It's driving real value. And I think there's a lot of organizations that end up using data, but they're not really doing anything to drive business impact with that data. And I think that's the big push. I think for it's always been a big push for me, is how can we continue to find ways to take data and actually drive real business impact with that data? How do we drive more revenue with that data? How do we help support our customers better with that data? How do we help our employees to be more productive with that data? Like, what do you do with the data? Because data in itself, just sitting there, is not driving business value. You got to do something with it. And so there's a big focus for me this year, is to continue to find opportunities. We've done a lot of that, but I think there's still opportunities for us to do. So automation, super important. There's a whole host of reasons why, around scale and also just the speed and velocity of our business. We need to be able to compete. I think when you talk about data, it's not just making sure the foundation is clean, but you also then have to move to like what you're doing to drive value with that data. And I think the third, which is why I have my colleague here on the call today, is we've got to think, we have to be a security first sort of mindset as a company and continue that. Right? We've done a great job here at PagerDuty of being secure, being thoughtful in the way we do things to make sure that we're safeguarding our customers. But I think we should continue to look at what's the next phase of the world of security. Security is like it never stops. You think you have it, you never have it. You think you have it, you never have it. It's a constantly shifting landscape because the bad guys are always finding new ways to do things. And so I think it's being constantly vigilant, and that's not going to change in 2024 for my team and sort of what other priorities we have. So those are the three big ones that come to mind.
Okay. Yeah, that's fantastic. And a great setup also to sort of turn things over to you, Heather, on
Right.
what are your top priorities and how does that fit in with these trends and the ever-changing security landscape?
Yeah, yeah. I've been in this space for a really long time, and we will occasionally cycle, but we never cycle back to the level. It's like a spiral upwards, right? Um, I think that for me and for all CISOs, 2024 needs to be the year of really reinvigorated strategic partnership across the company. Uh, the adoption, and I'm not trying to pull us back to automation and generative AI, but the adoption of generative AI across the company is a great opportunity for CISOs and for security professionals and for CIOs to really rebuild and cement in the relationships with the teams that you might not traditionally have worked with: marketing, sales, customer support, legal. They are the security impact of the data that we handle with those teams is becoming a bigger issue, and it's one that we can't just let happen in a vacuum. We need to be involved to make sure that everybody's doing the right thing, giving people the stories and the rationale as to why we need to go slow to go fast. I think that the other thing that is going to just be all over us in 2024, and this is probably unique to CISOs, is the stress of things like the SEC cybersecurity regulations and what that means, again, on how we partner, but the responsibility that the CISO is now carrying and has been clearly identified as carrying. And we need to make sure that we are living up to that responsibility, that we are really being clear and unemotional about the business risks that the company is carrying from a security posture point of view, so that it is clearly documented where we need to improve, so that everybody is staring at it and saying, yes, we all agree that this is a business risk that we are willing to accept, or nope, we're going to not, and this is not unique to PagerDuty, but some company is going to say, we're not going to ship this product because we've got an issue with it, or we're going to not sell it anymore because I've got some hardware that's got a problem. We need to be a lot more aggressive about how we are responding to threats as a result of the cybersecurity landscape in which we exist. And we're not going to do that, to circle back, we're not going to do that without partnership and collaboration across the company.
You are touching on something that was this kind of awkward thought I think I've been having, which is even going back, maybe about 20 years after there were some accounting scandals that led to new regulations like Sarbanes-Oxley. And it was right around the time when I was kind of entering the finance world. And, someone leaned over to me and said, now is not the time when anyone wants to be a CFO. And the climate was that kind of just that what is the word? Crucible moment when it was sort of, this was the time that was going to shape the next generation of CFOs that were born and living in that type of regulatory environment with the accountability that hadn't, in theory, it always been there, but was just there at a new level. It feels not to, not to sort of sound harsh, but it almost feels like we're in that kind of moment, like, wow, is this the time when anyone wants to be in that CISO position with the new regulations and the pressure on CISOs and CIOs, these sort of crucible moments when the role is shifting and taking on a new level of responsibility. And you've already touched on some of the things, the partnership that's going to be required to navigate it. What else do you think is, am I off base? Do you think that there's a change in the pressure, or is it like, Dormain, it's always
No.
been this hard?
I think it is. It has always been hard. I think it is being made harder. But again, I think that that's just part of the world. I think that there are people who are saying this isn't what I've signed up for, and they're going somewhere else, and that's great because they're going to take their skills and go somewhere else. For the rest of us, for people like me, this is, there isn't a challenge that I haven't wanted to try to do. And so the challenge here is, how do we take this increasingly regulatory driven, customer scrutiny driven environment and translate that into a business opportunity, right? What do we do to make sure that we are protecting our companies and our company's business and their customers in this world, right? And those of us that have been around long enough are looking at this and saying, okay, we've seen the fundamentals haven't changed, right? We know how to do the fundamentals. Maybe this is the time where the rest of the company is going to say, oh, we get it, right? This time we stand a chance of really moving the needle far faster than we have in the past, because everybody else now sees the pressure that is on a company from a cybersecurity threat point of view. And if I can, I just want to say, one of the things that we're doing at PagerDuty is the FedRAMP authorization that we're going through. That is to me, a clear example of how the company has all decided that we're going to row together in this path, because we've now got a very, very rigorous set of standards to which we manage. They're public. Anybody can go and read them. They know how we're audited. We're using this crucible moment as a means to really drive security transparency into our customer base. And I think that is how we take this crucible moment and turn it into something that really uplifts security across an enterprise. So,
no, and I well said, Heather. And I would also add to that. I think that crucible moment that you're talking about, I think it happened a few years back, where all of a sudden people started realizing some of the things we're talking about, like, hey, wow, data is kind of important.
Yeah.
Hey, wow, automation's sort of pretty important. Hey, wow, security is pretty important, not just like to just running the company, but for a company to actually continue to grow and be successful. Those things are important. And so all of a sudden, the CIO, the CISO got pushed forward into more of the front of the company versus being part of kind of the back office of the company. It became something that was like, hey, we need our CISO out there talking about what we're doing to help protect our customers, but also to help open up new business opportunities, FedRAMP. Hey, we need the CIO to step up more and be able to take data and do something that has a business impact, like helping drive revenue. So all of a sudden, the role, I see it as a huge opportunity. There was a turning point a few years back where all of a sudden these roles that Heather and I both occupy today became mission critical for companies' success. Yeah. And so I think it's a great time to be a CISO. It's a great time to be a CIO, because we have now all the tools and technology at our disposal to do a lot of really amazing things. The question for the folks that are watching this, that are sitting in our roles today or aspiring to sit in our roles today, is like, what do you do with that? How do you navigate through that? It's not just a technology question. It's not just a data question. It's not just a process question. It's not just a people question. It's sort of all the above. Yeah. And so you got to figure out how to balance all those things to be able to get to the impact you want. And it's all about the business impact. That's what Heather thinks about every day. That's what I think about every day. And business impact could be like how we manage risk. I think, how we manage data. Like, we're always thinking about what's the business impact here. And we want to make sure that we're always protecting the business and finding ways to help accelerate the business. So just to add on, I think Heather did a great job of sort of laying out this moment, this crucible moment as you talk about. I think you have to think through the lens of like huge opportunity for these roles, in my opinion.
Yeah. And you know what? You actually set up. We had a question come in from the audience, which I'm going to take a little liberty on wording here, but thank you for correcting me. Right? Like I love being told that I'm wrong about. No, the Crucible moment was a few years ago. Thanks for waking up, Dormain. But so what you're saying about, hey, this is the big opportunity. This is the time to show a lot more value to the business. Question from the audience about thinking about budgets, right? Because it's like, if this is the time to have more impact on the business, but we all know that doesn't mean that it's a blank check to go do the work that needs to be done.
Mhm.
So how do you think about, funding and budgeting for the types of things you need to take on this year?
So I'll jump in and start, and then I know because Eric and I have spent a lot of time thinking about this, because it is budget season. So first of all, there's the budget that you need to just keep the bare minimum of the security posture to keep the company running. That should not be open for debate. If it is, I think there are other discussions that have to happen. The way that I like to think about the budget is all of the things that I want to do. And there's always more than the business can consume from a headcount or a money point of view. Just to be really clear, that's just I always want more.
Yeah.
Is to put it into context. Okay, this is our risk posture today. And let's say that we are on hypothetically, if a company was on a scale of 1, in a scale of 1 to 5, 1 is the lowest, 5 is the highest. The company's at 1. Right? You turn the conversation into, okay, where do we want us to be? Is 3 our goal? Is 4 our goal? Is 5 our goal? How long is it going to take? Let's assume it's 3. How long is it going to take me to get to 3 with the current budget that I have? If you give me 3 more people and allow me to spend another $250,000 on tools, on automation, will that bring that timeline instead of taking 5 years? Can I bring that in and I'm going to get to the level of maturity I want in 2 years? And we turn that basically into a math problem, right?
Mhm.
This is where you've told me you want to be. This is what it's going to cost you to get there. If you don't like that timeline, let's look at what the budgets will do to bring it in or bring it out. That way we turn it into a very clear business risk conversation and we take the emotion out of it. And I have found that to be really successful, both in having the conversation with the people that hold the budget and also for me, rationalizing that I can't do everything right now, it allows me to say, okay, I have a path to get there. I can see how I get there, and we're just going to knock it off one at a time. Highest risk things are going to go first, and then we're just going to keep, each new turn of the crank, I will pick off the next low hanging fruit from a risk point of view, and we just keep on going and we just build a roadmap and we work. And that's kind of how business works anyways, right? So it's really bringing security into that whole roadmap milestone strategic way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Eric, how about you? What would you add in terms of just how do you think about budgeting for planning for all the different things that you can take on, and particularly in the climate of what a lot of organizations have seen in the last year in terms of layoffs and constraints on hiring. That's just been a little bit of a shift, right? In terms of what do we have to get done with the teams we have in place.
Yeah, I mean, we had 10 years of massive growth, huge investment, budgets growing, double digits. And I think we're now at a place where it's forcing some good conversations around, well, how do we optimize what we have? How do we make sure we start to go back and take a good hard look at the investments we've made? Which ones are going to be, which ones have delivered a lot of value? Which ones still have opportunity to deliver value before we go buy anything new, before we make any other big decisions on investments? And I think it's also forcing is a real hard look at prioritization.
Yeah.
I work in the model when I do budgeting of what's the most impact for the business going to drive, where we make investments, making sure that it's driving the most business impact, and that's in coordination and partnership with the business. but many times I see that there's lots of like pet projects and things people want to dump into the budget. And I think what we're seeing now is those things are getting called out a lot faster now because people just we don't have the dollars to do it. We don't have the staff to do it. So I think one is a prioritization. One is around making sure you're optimizing the investments we've already made, because a lot of us have made a lot of investments. So make sure those things make sense. If you have 3 of something, get it down to 1 of something. And then get full value out of that one investment. You're going to find some savings there. And I think there's going to be this kind of concept of, self-funding. So if you can save some money, optimize something, and, automate something, keyword, if you can automate something and you can help save some dollars, you can help save some time from your staff, you can repurpose those dollar savings and those time savings of your staff to new initiatives. So I think that's where automation starts to play into this game of like, hey, what's the future look like? And I think companies more and more are going to start saying, how do we take the same set of resources and get more out of them? It's not by giving them more work and just dumping it on them. It's how do we make their jobs more efficient as far as the way they're doing their jobs? And automation is going to play a role in that. So I do think companies are going through a little bit of a struggle right now to kind of reorient themselves away from like budgets are plentiful and constantly growing to like budgets are now flat or maybe even decreasing a little bit. How do you operate in that model? Because a lot of folks have never had that experience before.
Yeah.
Right. So this is the first time in their career they're like, oh my gosh, you're asking me to cut budget. You're asking me to do more with the same budget. So I think it's a little bit of a learning curve going on for folks.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And I love how you bring it back to where we started with automation, but in the context of budgeting and self-funding the types of improvements and innovation and regaining capacity. So great place to kind of close off. Thank you both for joining us this morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. And Happy New Year. Have a wonderful start to 2024. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.